State of Wisconsin, Circuit Court, Branch 1, Manitowoc County. State of Wisconsin Plaintiff versus Stephen A. Avery, Defendant. Partial motion hearing, case number 05-CF-381. Date, August 10th, 2006, before the Honorable Patrick L. Willis, Circuit Court Judge. Appearances on behalf of the State of Wisconsin: Kenneth R. Kratz, Special Prosecutor; Thomas J. Fallon, Special Prosecutor. On behalf of the defendant: Dean Strang, Attorney at Law; Jerome Buting, Attorney at Law. Stephen A. Avery, Defendant, appeared in person. Partial transcript of proceedings. Witnesses: Detective David Remiker, Sergeant Andrew Colburn, Special Agent Thomas Fassbender, Lieutenant Kelly Sipple, Lieutenant Brett Bowe. The Court. At this time, the Court calls State of Wisconsin v. Stephen Avery. It's case number 05-CF-381. We're here this morning for a continuation of a hearing on some pretrial motions that started yesterday. Will the parties state their appearance for the record, please? Attorney Kratz. State appears by Special Prosecutors Kratz and Fallon. Attorney Buting. Attorney Jerome Buting appears on behalf of Mr. Avery. Also present is Attorney Dean Strang. The Court. All right, I believe we're taking testimony this morning on the defense motion challenging the multiple execution of search warrants. Mr. Buting, you may call your first witness. Attorney Buting. Thank you. Detective David Remiker, called as a witness herein, having been first duly sworn, was examined and testified as follows. The Clerk. Please be seated. Please state your name. Spell your last name for the record. The witness. Dave Remiker, R-E-M-I-K-E-R. Attorney Buting. Good morning. The witness. Good morning. Direct examination by Attorney Buting. We left off your last testimony with the efforts to obtain a warrant, search warrant, on November 5th for the Avery property, correct? I believe so. And I believe you said that you went with Investigator Wiegert and one or more lawyers to get the warrant itself from Judge Fox? Yes. And then you returned to the Avery property with the warrant at that time? At what time? I believe it was about 3:30 in the afternoon. And then what was your assignment after that? Well, there were several discussions about how we were going to go about doing this. Obviously, the scope of our concern in our search was to locate Teresa. And eventually we put some teams together, some individuals. What we tried to do is coordinate our efforts so that there was a Calumet County officer and a Manitowoc County officer together. And we were assigned different locations to go in and find Teresa. And by that time, you were aware that because of the possible appearance of a conflict of interest, the Manitowoc Sheriff's Department had turned over lead authority for the investigation to Calumet, right? Yes. And so you first were paired with an investigator Steyer, I believe? Gary Steyer, correct. From Calumet? Yes. And you made your first entry on the warrant to Mr. Avery's trailer? Yes. And that would have been at 3:48 p.m. on November 5th? Correct. And you did that by force, by kicking in the door, did you not? Yes. And then what did you do when you were inside? We entered. There was two doors. The door to the right, we entered. We entered into a living room. The kitchen is to the right. There is a hallway to the left that leads to the bathroom, and then another bedroom way on the end. Just went through the residence, checking closets, looking for Teresa, or any evidence that Teresa was there. Any clothing, anything obvious that would indicate Teresa would be in that residence. Now, so we're clear on the record. You testified yesterday that you had actually, the day before, November 4th, you had been in the very same trailer with consent? Yes. So you had gone through and opened up doors and closets on that occasion as well? Correct. And neither the 4th nor the 5th, then, when you made this first entry, did you see anything that would indicate that Teresa had been there? I did not find Teresa in his trailer. I'm sorry, the last part of that? I did not find Teresa in his trailer. In the trailer? Correct. So you were in it only about 10 minutes at that time? Well, I believe we went to the garage. Let's stick with the trailer first. I'm recalling the times. The garage was around a little after 4 o'clock. If I told you that you entered the trailer at 3:48 on November 5th and exited at 3:58 p.m., would that be correct? Yes. Okay. And then after leaving the trailer, you went immediately into the detached garage that was located next door? Yes. And if I told you that you entered at 3:58 p.m. and left the garage at 4:06 p.m., would that fit with your recollection? If that's what my report says, that would be accurate. Okay, and again, in the garage, you were looking for Teresa or any evidence that would indicate Teresa had been there? I would say that's pretty accurate. And again, you found neither. Well, I didn't. We didn't find her. There were some shell casings on the floor. Did you pick those up at that time? No. Okay, so nothing else? I don't believe so. All right, now, you went back, I assume, had some other duties elsewhere on the property after that, but then you returned to the trailer, that is Stephen Avery's trailer, at 5:35 p.m. with the dog handler. Do you recall that? No. Do you ever remember going in the trailer, in Stephen Avery's trailer, at any point with the dog handler? I did not. Let's see. I'm going to show you an excerpt from the Calumet County Sheriff's Department report, page 89 at the top. Ask you to review the last 3 paragraphs. Are you familiar with that? Yeah, I've had discussions about that entry. About that what? About the entry on the report. That makes reference to myself going into the residence with the dog handler. Does that refresh your recollection on this? No, that wasn't me. So you're saying that this report is an error? It is not my report. My report indicates the times that I was in the residence. For some reason, my name was listed as an individual going in on that occasion. That's not the case. Okay, so you at no point entered with a cadaver dog to look around the apartment? Must have been somebody else that he documented. That wasn't me. Were you aware that that was done? I don't believe so. Okay, all right. In any event, you did go back in the trailer, that is, Mr. Stephen Avery's trailer again, on November 5th, correct? Yes. And I'm talking about after the search warrant was obtained? Correct. And it was approximately 7:30, I believe? Correct, yes. And so we have these times for the record. If I told you that you entered the Avery trailer, Stephen Avery trailer, at 7:30 p.m. and exited at 10:05 p.m., would that fit your recollection? That sounds right. That's on page 11 of 22? Yep. The court. Was that 10:05 the time? Attorney Fallon. Yes. Attorney Buting. Yes, 7:30 to 10:05 p.m. Question by Attorney Buting. Now, on that occasion, you also entered with Sergeant Colburn, correct? Yes. And Lieutenant Link? Yes. And Calumet Sheriff's Officer Sergeant Tyson? Correct. So there were 4 officers, 3 of which were Manitowoc Sheriff's Department officers, right? Yes. And the 4 of you then spent 2.5 hours, 2 hours and 35 minutes, searching the entire trailer. Is that right? Yes. And you seized a number of items? Yes. Including bedding, photographs, handcuffs. Do you recall that? I believe so, yes. And you yourself were also searching, looking at the walls and the doorways and areas like that to see if there might be any evidence of blood as well, correct? That's my job, yes. Okay, and you did locate some items that at the time you believed might be bloodstains, later determined not to have any relationship to Teresa Halbach, but you did make note of those, right? There were several areas within the residence that contained a red dried substance. Okay, and you had photographed them? I believe I took some digital photographs of those areas, yes. Okay, and then you also took swabs of those areas? Yes. And by that, I mean you were taking well, you tell me. I don't want to lead you. Tell me what taking a swab means. Well, what you do is you take a sealed, unused, sterile, cotton-tipped applicator. You remove that from its packaging. Usually what you do is you prepare another package for that applicator to go into. You use a sealed, distilled water container, and you apply a few drops to the end of the sterile, cotton-tipped applicator. You then swab the dried liquid substance with the applicator. You place it into your evidence packaging. You seal it, you label it, you secure it. And then a lot of times, in many cases, you would also take a controlled swab, which is another swab. Use the same technique. You swab an area in close proximity to the area where you took the first swab from. All right, and you did that more than once while you were in the Stephen Avery trailer on November 5th that evening, correct? Yes. And the point of that was you were looking for trace evidence, right? Yes. Specifically to see whether or not there might be any DNA associated with Teresa Halbach? Well, many of the areas I observed look consistent with blood. Okay, and that's your job, was to do that and to look for that? Absolutely. And you were commanded by the warrant to do that, right? Yes. And so you did do that. You took swabs? You can refer to your report if you need to. It's on page 12, just to refresh your recollection. But you identified 3 different spots on the wooden frame area surrounding the doorway, is that right? Yes, right outside Stephen's bedroom, there was a wooden frame around the door, and along the wall there were some dried red substances on the wall. Okay, and then you also found a drop of similar dried red substance on the floor of the bathroom, correct? Yes. And you took a swab of that? Yes. And you also found a similar type of a red marking on the wooden molding on the right side of the bedroom doorway? I'm sorry, right side of the doorway, facing the doorway from the interior of the residence? That's the first one I talked about, the molding around the doorway. Okay, but now you took another one, second to last full paragraph. Attorney Fallon. Your Honor, I'm going to object because it seems to me that although they were in there doing their search and that it does take time, and we'll certainly concede to that, I'm not sure that the painstaking detail of what was collected where and how it was collected, other than the fact that collecting evidence takes time and is detailed work. Beyond that, I'm not sure how this relates to the multiple execution argument. The court. Mr. Buting? Attorney Buting. Well, I could tighten it up a little bit, but it is relevant in terms of, their evidence, whether or not he was completing his search of the residence at that time. The court. Well, I agree that I can understand why you have to get it in, but I don't want to be here until midnight either. I think for purposes of this hearing, the level of detail that we're going into right now is probably unnecessary. Question by Attorney Buting. All right, let me ask you this way, if you recall. Do you know how many swabs in total you took of things that you thought might possibly be bloodstains? I understand later that they have proven not to have any relevance, but you were doing your job at the time. How many swabs did you take from the residence on that evening? The entire residence? Yes. I can't give you an exact number. In my estimation, I would say probably between 10 and 20. So you found a lot of possible areas to look throughout the trailer, right? Yes. Not just by the doorway, but also in the living room, front door, areas like that. There were some areas on the front door. Wasn't sure if it was paint, blood, other substance. I wasn't sure. I believe I took some swabs in that area. I don't know if there was anything in the living room. It was more in the bathroom and Stephen's bedroom. Now, Was it primarily your responsibility? Of the 4 officers in there, was it primarily your responsibility to be doing the trace evidence search, or what? We all played a part. We all had a section of the residence or the bedroom. I have done collections similar to this in the past than the use of those type of kits. I felt very confident in my abilities, and we worked together. One individual may have taken the collection. The other individual may have prepared the packaging to put the collection in. So using my equipment, sure, it made the most sense. But do you know whether any of the other 3 remaining officers that were in there also collected trace evidence in the form of swabs? In the form of swabs, I would say that it was either myself or Sergeant Colburn who would have done the swabs or participated in the collection of those. Okay, now, you also seized, in terms of trace evidence, you also found like a lint roller with some sort of adhesive material on it? Yes. And you seized that? I did not seize that, I used that. Oh, I'm sorry. You used that in order to take samples of fibers, hairs, things like that? It's a technique you use. In this case, the carpeting in Stephen's bedroom, I used a lint roller to just roll over the carpeting and collect trace items of evidence that may have been in the carpeting. Okay, and you went all around the bedroom or all around the bed anyway? I think the main area that I used was when you first walk into the bedroom, between the doorway and the bed, near the nightstand, that area. Okay, and then also a number of items, many items were seized. Do you know about how many items were actually taken on that search? It's my job to collect it, search, and then everything was turned right over to Calumet County. They did the list. I have no idea. Could it be as many as 50 items? Would that fit with your recollection? It could have been. Okay, and I'm not going to go through all of those. I'm sure you're happy to hear. Thank you. But it did include a vacuum cleaner bag and filter, correct? I believe that was taken. Whether that was taken Saturday or Sunday, I'm not sure. You could look at the bottom of page 12 of your report, last full paragraph. Yes, the vacuum bag and filter were removed from the vacuum cleaner on that search, right? Correct. And the 4 of you searched and continued as long as necessary that evening. Isn't that right? Yes. No one kicked you out of the trailer and said it's time to go? No. No one put any kind of a time limit on when you should get out of that trailer that night, is that right? No, that's right, I'm sorry. Okay, and then when you left at 10:05 p.m., you had completed your search of the entire trailer, Stephen Avery trailer, is that right? Well, that search, yes. As far as you knew, at that point, you had searched or you had seized everything that had any apparent evidentiary value from Stephen Avery's trailer? No. I know we had some questions about certain things. I mean, at that time, we didn't know a lot. And there were magazine after pornographic magazine in there. There was pictures, there was stuff. We weren't sure at the time whether it was relevant or whether we should take it, so. But anything that had obvious evidentiary value that fit within your parameters of the search warrant you took on that night? No, we went back to get a number of other things. There was a shotgun or gun in the bedroom. Answer my question though, is there some reason you didn't take the shotgun that night? I don't recall. There may have been a question whether it was included in the search warrant. We had a lot of questions about what we should take, what we shouldn't take. Okay, but in your actual words of your report at 22:05, 10:05 p.m., the officers were completed with the processing of the residence and went out of the residence. Isn't that what it says? That's what it says. While that was going on, by the way, Sergeant Tyson, the Calumet officer, was also doing sort of a written log of all of the items and the times that they were seized and where they were located, and all of that, right alongside us. Right alongside of us. Okay, all right. Now, the next morning, this is November 6th, did you return to the Avery salvage property? Yes. At about what time? I believe I arrived at around 8 o'clock a.m. Okay, and were you assigned certain duties again? Yes. And who gave you those assignments? Well, again, we met Investigator Remiker, Agent Fassbender, Lieutenant Link. We were all involved in the discussions, and there was a decision made to go process the garage. And we made assignments who would participate in that search and went and did. My question is, who made those assignments, or did you just sort of volunteer for it? We all did, depending on who was there, who the personnel was, who had the equipment, who worked well together. It was a cooperative effort amongst all of us making those decisions. All right, and on that occasion, I had a say in that, Wigard had a say in that, we all did. And on that occasion, the same team was formed. I'm sorry, I take that back. It was the same team of Manitowoc officers? Correct. Yourself? Yes. Lieutenant Link and Sergeant Colburn? Yes. But a different Calumet officer, this time a Deputy Kaharski, was assigned to go along with you? Yes. His responsibility was primarily, he was going to be taking custody as well of any of the items? Correct. And when you went back to the Avery property, you did not go into Mr. Avery's trailer residence at that time, did you? Not initially? No. Instead, you went into the garage, the detached garage next to it? Yes. Which you had entered only once before, for about 7 minutes on the day before? Correct. And if I told you that you entered the detached garage next to Mr. Stephen Avery's residence at 8 a.m. and left at 9:47 a.m., would that fit with your recollection? That sounds accurate. So, the four of you, the four officers, were inside the garage searching for about 1 hour and 47 minutes? Correct. And can you tell me how big the garage is? Approximate estimate? About a standard 2-car garage size. Okay, and the four of you had went through the garage thoroughly looking for, again, any evidence of Teresa Halbach or evidence that would fit with what was sought in the warrant? Correct. And no one kicked you out of the garage at any particular time? No. You were able to stay as long as you wanted? Yes. And you did seize some items, including some .22 caliber shells, correct? Correct. And also some, again, possible blood stains that you noted on the floor in various areas, correct? And again, you did the same type of a process of collecting them with swabs, sealing them for possible DNA tests, and that sort of thing? Correct. And I recognize, again, that those didn't turn out like you thought they might, but nevertheless, you were doing your job and were looking for possible blood of Teresa Halbach. Is that right? I guess I was. If it was blood I was collecting, and whose it was, I'm not able to determine that. Okay, or whether it was even blood at all? Correct. Okay, and now you finished searching the garage at 9:47 a.m. You were right next door to the Stephen Avery trailer, just a few feet away, right? Yes. Did you go back into the trailer at that time? No. In fact, you didn't go back into the trailer until, that is Stephen Avery's trailer, until about 12:25 p.m.? Correct. That same day, November 6th? Yes. And you went back because you were asked to go, is that right? I believe so. By who? I'm guessing those conversations took place with Investigative Wiegert and or Agent Fassbender. And if I told you that you entered at 12:25 p.m. and left at 12:48 p.m., this is Mr. Stephen Avery's trailer on November 6th, would that fit with your recollection? Sounds about right. And on that occasion you you went back to get the weapons you saw. Earlier I talked about some of the questions we had. Obviously, this was in reference to some other items that we had observed on the first search, and we went back and collected some additional things. Some magazines, I think you mentioned, photographs, the weapon above the bed. I believe there was some additional bedding in the other bedroom within the residence. There may have been a carpet shampooer that was taken also. And again, you had as much time as you wanted in that trailer on that occasion. No one kicked. Is that right? Yeah, I mean, we had a lot of searches to do that day. We had our work cut out for ourselves. So I wouldn't say we were rushing, but we knew there were other places that needed to be processed. And again, the officers who entered Mr. Avery's trailer at 12:25 p.m., November 6th, were the same ones that had gone into the garage. That is, yourself, Detective Remiker, Lieutenant Link, Sergeant Colburn, all from Manitowoc, as well as Calumet's Deputy Kaharski. Is that right? I believe so, yes. So all four of you were back in there? I believe so. And did you, at any time after that, go back into Mr. Avery's or the detached garage next to Mr. Avery's residence? Attorney Fallon. Your Honor. Answer. Second time? Attorney Fallon. I'm going to oppose an objection here. As I'm listening to the line of questioning here, it seems remarkably similar, if not identical, to the questions and information obtained from Lieutenant Link in yesterday's call. So this does seem to me duplicitous. I'm not quite sure how this adds to the equation. I mean, it's quite obvious that they entered the residence on a number of occasions while conducting this overall search. So I'm not quite sure what we are accomplishing with Detective or Investigative Remiker's echoing what Lieutenant Link testified to. Attorney Buting. Actually, I think we're done with this. That was going to be my final question. Question by Attorney Buting. Did you go back in the garage yourself? The court. You may answer. Answer. No. Attorney Buting. All right, thank you. The court. Mr. Fallon, are you going to be conducting cross? Attorney Fallon. I am. Thank you, Judge. The court. Go ahead. Cross-examination by Attorney Fallon. How long have you been an evidence collector, or evidence technician, as they are sometimes referred to? Well, I don't recall when I attended the State Crime Lab Evidence Tech School. I would guess that's at least 6-7 years ago, would be a guess. All right. Is the search for evidence, particularly trace evidence, time-consuming? It's very detail-oriented. You have to be very careful. Yes, definitely. Does it take a lot of time? Does it take time? It takes a lot of time. All right, and why does it take time? Well, when you're looking for trace evidence, it doesn't stand out. You have got to look for it. You have got to find it. You have to be on your hands and knees, and then when you're collecting those things, you're dealing with very small samples. You're using tweezers. You're using small patching material. You are using cotton-tipped applicators that you have to apply sterile water to. You're doing a collection. You're doing a controlled sample. You're packaging it. You're sealing it. You're labeling it. Each item, there's a process that you follow to make sure that that evidence is secure and is as pure as you can collect it. All right, so in effect, first of all, you have to spend time to find trace evidence, right? Definitely. And then there's an entirely separate process of collecting the evidence, correct? Yes. And that collection is sometimes painstakingly slow. It can be. Sometimes it's rather quick. For instance, if you are just securing a gun from the wall, that takes but a matter of a moment or two, perhaps a minute or two to collect it, log it in, and secure it. But perhaps as opposed to looking for fiber evidence or possible blood spots, that takes more time, doesn't it? Definitely. And as I understand it, you're required to basically Once you find an item, you deal with that item. You log it in, you picture it. If you do take a picture, you collect it, you secure it, you label it, before you go on to the next item. It's one item at a time, correct? And that's to ensure the integrity of the piece of evidence you're collecting, without a doubt. And as a matter of fact, especially when you are looking for trace evidence and things like that, there are environmental factors that affect the collection of trace evidence. Yes. For instance, would you say it's easier to find trace evidence with natural daylight as opposed to artificial incandescent light? Natural daylight is always advantageous. And your recollection was that you, yourself, took anywhere from 10 to 20 swabs. Each one had to be individually processed? Yes. All right, and as counsel suggested, there could have been perhaps 50 or more items secured that evening. That's possible. All right, and each one had to be individually found, right? Correct. They had to be pictured or preserved, and then they were collected, correct? Correct. Packaged, labeled, insert number, date, time of collection, everything. Before the next item could be processed? Definitely. All right, now, with respect to the assignments, it's true, is it not, that although there was a great deal of give and take and discussion amongst the investigators, that notwithstanding that, Investigative Wiegert and Special Agent Fassbender were in charge of the overall investigation, correct? Definitely. So in terms of the cooperative effort, in other words, they sought your ideas and your input, correct? Yes. But the decisions in terms of what was to be done and when and how and allocation of resources, those were decisions made by Wiegert and Fassbender? Correct. Based on your input and available resources? You are exactly right, Attorney Fallon. That's all, thank you. The court. Anything else, Mr. Buting? Attorney Buting. Just one or two. Redirect examination by Attorney Buting. Mr. Fallon asked you a number of questions about what you were trained to do or what you might do in certain cases. How long it takes to collect trace evidence in general, correct? Yes. But in this case, on November 5th, in those 2.5 hours, while you were in that trailer, you did, in fact, get down on your hands and knees, right? With the lint roller? Yes. And to collect a swab off the bathroom floor? Correct. And you were doing all of those things that you would normally do to find trace evidence, correct? Yes. And you are a thorough officer, aren't you? I believe so. And you did as thorough and complete a job as you could that night. I believe so. And Mr. Fallon mentioned that Agents Fassbender and Investigative Wiegert were in charge? Investigative Wiegert. Wiegert, I'm sorry. I say that half the time. Is that right? Well, yeah. They were assigned as the lead investigators, correct. So they were the ones who, well, let me ask you this. Then, Lieutenant Sipple, are you familiar with him? Maybe I'm pronouncing his name wrong. I've heard his name. If I would see him, I would probably recognize him. I don't. Lieutenant Bowe? I think it is. Do you know him? Or Bowie? I'm sure if I've seen him, I would recognize him. So neither of them were directing you or advising you what to do during the entire week, or so that the Avery property was seized? If I'm correct, I believe those individuals had a lot to do with the security or the watching over the property, some of the layers of security that we had out there. Okay, they would have been in the command post area that was set up? No, they would have been parked right next to Steve's trailer in a squad car or standing outside the trailer providing security or watching over that residence. There were several layers of security out there. Are you talking about lieutenants? Those Calumet County officers. Okay, but my question is, were they involved in the direction or decision-making of the search? In particular, the search of Mr. Avery, Stephen Avery's residence? I don't believe so, no. That was Wiegert and Fassbender, collectively? with your cooperative decisions? Yes. Attorney Buting. Thank you. The court. Anything else? Attorney Fallon. I just have one question. By Attorney Fallon. What did you mean when you said we had a lot of searches to do that day in response to counsel's question on your Sunday's questioning? Well, we had about 37 acres, thousands of cars, residents, shops, outbuildings. There was a lot to do. Attorney Fallon. All right. Thank you. Attorney Buting. One last. Further redirect examination by Attorney Buting. Do you know how many officers, law enforcement officers, were out there on that 40-acre parcel beside you? When? During the week. No idea. As many as 100? Could have been. So there were many others available to do searches, besides yourself and your foursome that was doing those searches, correct? Based on our discussion, based on our confidence in our abilities, based on our experience working together, based on the access to the equipment and the being comfortable with that equipment and being able to use that equipment properly, Attorney Buting. Judge, he's not answering my question. Would you please answer the question I asked, which is? The witness. I was getting to that. Question by Attorney Buting. Were there other officers available that were searching in other areas besides just the four of you? There may have been, but it didn't make sense for those individuals to do those searches. To do what searches? Of the residences, the garage, the buildings. Didn't make sense for them, for anyone but you four, to search any of the buildings on that property? Well, you obviously want to use evidence techs, people who are trained to do those types of searches and collections of evidence. And you had, it's limited. Well, you had plenty of evidence techs out there during that week, did you not? No. Well, you had the crime lab. They showed up with 2 people on Saturday. Okay, you had, which one was a photographer only. You had DCI. Fassbender may have been the only one out there Saturday. But during the week, and as we went on, up to November 9th, I was only there until Sunday night, Attorney Buting. All right, thank you. The court. All right, you are excused. The witness. Thank you.